Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's webinar on all things to do with dairy co-fertility. This evening's webinar is sponsored by XLVet Skillnet and Zoetis. I am joined here by Marie-Louise Ryan, veterinary surgeon from Mulcair Veterinary in County Limerick. Marie, can you tell me something about what you wish to talk about tonight?
Thanks, Jerry. Tonight I'll be talking about our role as vets and helping farmers in the breeding season, providing some practical advice around the breeding season and in terms of using synchronization programs with their heifers, in their cows, tightening up late calvers and generalized fertility issues.
Very good. I'm also joined by Michael Ring, dairy farmer from Imlay, County Tipperary. Michael, can you tell me some background on your farm, please?
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. I'm farming in Imlay, County Tipperary. I'm farming in partnership with my father, Liam. Together we're farming a total of 53 hectares, milking just shy of 80 cows, and also keeping our calves onto beef as well. Look, as regards breeding, I suppose I have heat detection collars on my cows, and last year was the first year that I've synchronized my heifers.
Very good, thank you. And I'm also joined by Martin Kavanagh, Interim CEO from Munster Bovine. Martin, can you give a brief introduction on what you wish to talk about tonight?
Hey Jerry, you've two Tipperary men on the panel now, so you need to be slightly careful. Anyway, but from my point of view, the role of Munster Bovine, we provide AI services and semen sales in the Munster catchment and Clare and Galway as well. There's about 150 plus AI technicians on the road, and a big chunk of our agenda and part of the agenda with our co-op shareholders and owners is looking at the sustainability piece and using sex semen and dairy beef. So I think the part of this webinar really is chatting about the sensible and good use of sex semen and dairy beef for the dairy herds. Yeah.
Very good, and that's a big challenge facing the industry.
Absolutely.
I'm also joined by Charles Chavas from Zoetis, veterinary advisor to Zoetis. Charles, can you tell us what you wish to talk about tonight, please?
Thanks, Jerry, and good to be here tonight. We're involved in health generally, in the sense we're involved with vaccines and treatments of animals, but also specifically we're involved also with the hormones and the synchronization programs. And what I'm hoping this evening is that we will outline some of the benefits of using synchronization programs and the opportunity to use sex semen. But I also think it's very important that many farmers have already tried it and have dipped their toe in and have had a positive experience. Other people haven't had such a good experience. But what I hope is that this evening we'll talk about it and people will see whether it's suitable for their farms. And it's not suitable for every farm, and not everyone should be using sex semen, but it's out there and it's certainly a big opportunity for the industry generally. So I'm hoping that we'll tease a few of those things out, as well as looking at where synchronization fits in, whether it be with heifers and trying to reduce labor, but also getting them lined up for sex semen, or with cows. And as Mary-Louise mentioned there about these animals, poor fertility animals, again, we can help some of those ones, those late calvers, those animals that haven't seen bulling. We can do some work on them. But it's going to be a team approach in the sense that we've got the farmer, we've got the practitioner, and we've got the AI technician. And really, they've all got to get together to get to work on the fertility.
Very good, thanks, Charles. Earlier last month, we visited Michael's farm in Imlay, County Tipperary, and we shot a series of videos. The first of these videos was on the importance and the value of good fertility and a tight calving pattern.
The benefits of having a tight calving pattern are huge. Obviously, days in milk for my cows is what drives profit. So if I can have as many cows calved as early as possible, that's going to obviously drive profit for me for the year. Also, as well as that, having cows calved early gives those cows that extra chance. They might have had 1 or 2 heats over them before I start breeding again in May. So if I can have those cows calved early, it gives them more of a chance of coming back into the herd again for the following year. There are challenges to a tight calving pattern. It's a huge workload at a busy time of the year, so labour can be an issue. I'm not too bad here. I'm lucky enough that I have both parents on the farm, so they look after calf rearing. In general, I don't feed a calf, to be honest with you, from the start of the year, unless in exceptional circumstances. Labour is an issue. Obviously, facilities can be an issue on some farms as well. Again, we're not too bad here, but if you have a lot of cows calving, it can put pressure on facilities also. once the cow calves early, she has a chance to have a couple of heats over her. It gives her a chance to get going again. And I find early calver has a much more of a chance of coming back in calf early again. You know, maybe the first service or second service, hopefully after that, you know. I find collars are an excellent addition. I'm only using them for the last year. To be honest with you, before that I was using tail paint all the time, which was good as well. But I do a small amount of work off farm as well, especially at that time of the year. And you know, if I'm tail painting, it means I'm getting up to check cows in between each row. And obviously there's a labour saving aspect when all I have to do is look at my phone and see what cows are in heat, and I can draft out those cows accordingly then. There are huge benefits to having those heifer calves on the ground and calved early. There is a little bonus where when you're just starting your calving and you have, you know, 7, 8, 10, 12, 15, whatever amount it is of heifers on the ground, that is a bonus, and that does give you a little boost at the start of calving, you know. But also apart from that, those heifer calves, once they're up and going early, they have a much more of a chance of being your heifers in the parlour in 2 years' time. So that's really important.
Graham, from our point of view, Munster Bovine, and we're promoting 6-week calving rates and getting more AI done in there. What is that real benefit to driving the 6-week calving rate from our point of view?
Well, one of the key metrics for any dairy system is days in milk. Compact calving gives you that days in milk. There's Tagus figures there to say just profit difference for up to €400 a cow between a cow calving in May and a cow calving in February.
What sort of things that can we do with the farmer to get that early AI, get that efficiency in that AI system done?
For sure, it's planning and talking. I suppose heifers is where you start. I suppose you'd like to get your heifers AI'd early and keep them calving early. That's one of the first things. But planning this back, you know, from the time of calving starts, is to get a plan in place, see what worked last year, where we want to go this year.
Yeah, because we probably find that we got heifers out farms that have to be dealt with in a particular way, and one of our goals is that we want to get 70% of the cows back in calving within sort of 6 weeks. So if you're recommending even for any size of farm, how are we going to start dealing with that heifer group?
In the ideal scenario, we'd like to see the heifers being bred before the cows, up to a week to 10 days. I know in reality it's probably not practical in some cases, but when it's broken down and a farmer might say, oh yeah, my heifers are on the outside place, I can now get them out of the way, come back and focus on my cows. So it works. It's a win-win for the technician, it's a win-win for the farmer, and it's a win-win for the heifer going forward, because you have her calving compactly, bred to the best genetics, and you get, you know, an early bunch of heifer calves that you can rear on, and it compounds for the following year.
Yeah, and what we probably find is when guys are doing really good cow selection for sexed, so we're picking cows that are in good body condition, young cows that are calved long enough. Conceptions out of sex are actually very high in once-a-day systems once you're selecting the right cow. And I suppose the golden rule is if the cow is too fresh when you're arriving on, she's not for sex. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, the rule of thumb is if she's still bulling while you're AIing, she's to either get conventional or be left till after AI in the afternoon. But if a cow is in standing heat while you're there, it's a no-go for sex. Really.
It's a no-go for sex. So yeah, and the great thing about the EBI report, actually, just from the numbers, without even seeing the cows, EBI is so nailed on, we can probably tell what those cows look like by just looking at the numbers. Is that fair enough, Graham?
For sure, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We know they're big, small, what kind of yields that we're going to get, what sort of fertility or innate fertility is in those cows. And I think that's a really, really important point, is that, and I can't remember, it was a Porrick French or one of the lads from Chaga saying, pick the cows in the herd that are your favourite cows. That those are the cows you want, and maybe work from there, and we can translate that into papers. A real interesting one that's coming up, and I see it more and more when we're looking at the quality of our bulls now, the health sub-index is becoming a major part. I see we've one bull there in the catalogue at the moment. He's doing very, very well. He's got the highest health sub-index. Are you finding farmers are concentrating a little more on that? Is that something that's of interest?
Yeah, for sure, and I suppose to get an understanding of the figures within that health sub-index, like, you know, when you tease it out, and there might have been an issue with TB, for example, or mastitis or cell count, like when you tease out those figures, it really does get the farmer interested in what we can actually do here to prevent the prevalence of TB or whatever may come down the line on this farm.
Is there any real key thing within that lifetime report, within the milk recording, that you would see is important for a farmer, particularly in his decision which are the best cows to take?
Quite often when you go into the lifetime report and you're highlighted in red, you know, the cows that are below the herd average, quite often you'll go through the list and the farmer I'll have said this cow is red, and I'll explain the reasons. He said, oh, for whatever reason she's old or she's sold or whatever. And it kind of teases itself out when you go through the thing.
Yeah.
And a farmer will say to you, look, I don't really like that cow anyway. And that's the way it goes. But for sure, that lifetime report thing is hugely powerful when it comes to a farmer making decisions.
Yeah, one of the key things that we see inside in it is, and we use the term double reds. So if a cow has got a red score for the lifetime margin, and we got a red score for the lactation margin as such in there, we call them double red cows. They have to be bred to beef, or they got to be taken out of the system. And it's often a real simple rule. And as you say, Graham, it's picking out those cows. The farmer often knows those cows, but just has to see it in print that they're bad. Yeah?
Yeah, for sure. And we will then really focus in on the top 20-30% of the cows in the herd and see where we can go with those. When you narrow that down, it brings on your herd average so much more than what you're doing if you're broadly breeding most of the herd.
Yeah, and I suppose the last point in that is we've probably moved away from just breeding black and white in those first couple of weeks, that we're now selecting the cows to breed black and white to in the first couple of weeks. So we've early calving, but highest genetic merit.
Definitely.
I usually start discussing the breeding season when I'm actually doing the pregnancy scanning the previous summer. When I would be scanning the late calvers as such, I would point out to the farmer that maybe we should try and tighten these up next spring when they're calving. And then I'd go forward, and as soon as I start doing calls in February or March to the farm, I'll start talking about the breeding season then, and getting cows organised and getting heifers ready for synchronising and making sure they're in the right body condition. And if cows are too thin, I'll generally point it out to the farmer and, I'll suggest maybe that we body condition score the herd, increase feeding, or to put cows on once a day milking if necessary. With heifer breeding, the key points would certainly be to make sure they're at the appropriate weight. That obviously needs to be monitored very early on, because if you start worrying about heifer weights in February and March and you're going breeding in April, you're too late. So I would certainly encourage farmers to weigh their heifers pre-housing and monitor their weight gain over the course of the winter, so that if they are behind, we can do something about it then, rather than trying to fix things when it's too late.
Michael, in our video you mentioned the benefits of having early born heifer calves on your farm.
Yeah, look, obviously the benefits of those are huge. I suppose, firstly, those calves are born at a time when the farmer isn't yet overly busy, so a little bit more attention can be given to those calves, and also when we are looking for those calves to be your heifers in the parlour in 2 years' time, those early calves have more of an opportunity to meet that weight requirement, especially when we're talking about sync programs and so on. Obviously the heifers have to be up to their required weight. It's an awful lot easier from a farmer point of view that if those calves are born early, they have much more of a chance to meet that weight requirement on time,
And for a dairy animal, when they're born, they're on a treadmill, so time is very important, of the essence.
Absolutely.
So in terms of weight gain on that, Mary Louise, are there certain levels that we want these calves to reach, certain targets?
Oh, absolutely. And I suppose those targets are relative to what type of cow you have and the mature body weight your cows actually are. Tagish actually provide a very useful calculator in terms of where your calves should be, your heifers should be for their age. I suppose the fundamental is that these heifers at breeding have to be 60% of their mature body weight. So, we have to meet those targets every step of the way. And I suppose the first target is weaning, and to make sure your calves are getting to that point at weaning. And if they're not where they need to be, to continue feeding the milk for a little bit longer, and not just weaning at a set date. I think it's very important.
And it's very important for the farmer to know his own cow type and his own mature cow body weight.
Absolutely, and that involves both looking at their maintenance figure on their EBI as well as the actual weight on the scales. So it is important for you to both use the paper and the practical of actually looking at the cows and see what they weigh.
Very good, thank you very much. And in terms of lifetime production, the value of having the early calf, Martin, would you like to make any comments?
Yeah, if we're looking at, look, it's a key part of the milk recording piece when we're looking at lifetime reports, and the influence of the calving data on that and the overall lifetime production or the lactation production is very, very significant. And taking up on Mary Louise's point there, there's a couple of things there. The level of information that's provided through milk recording, through EBI reports and so on about where that herd is going, where it has been and where it will be is enormously important. So to use those type of measures are important. And if we look at those maiden heifers coming in, and they're really getting chosen quite a lot now for synchronization programs with sexed. They're the most fertile animals generally that we're dealing with. B, they're your highest genetic merit, and we want our female calves coming off them. And also when we're using sexed, we generally are into easier calving. You know, we're getting 90% pure sex. We're getting 9 out of 10 of those calves are going to be female. So it's all advantageous towards it. So we use the information, we pick our top genetics, we get our sex semen into those animals, and they generally then drive on in our program in terms of that early calving and a 6-week calving rate in the spring system.
Excellent. And Charles, in terms of the financials, what are the benefits of a good fertility in a dairy farm?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of work done on this, and you know, our situation here in Ireland is, I'm not saying it's unique, but we've got the spring calving, block calving herds, and Teagasc have done a lot of work on this, and they've looked at the financials and you know, the key driver of profitability was basically the 6-week calving rate. So getting, you know, the target they've set is sort of 90% of cows of your herd should calve down in the first 6 weeks. And that's a challenging thing to achieve from the point of view of these conversations about the fertility side of things. It also creates a lot of work for a farmer when it actually does happen. But when you look at the numbers, there is a carrot out there in the sense that the work that Teagasc have done, that for every % that the herd improves, so if you can move the herd, now actually that's another thing, the target may be 90%, but the average at the moment is only 66%. So nationally we've got a huge scope to improve. Now in fairness, there are farms out there, the top 10% of farms are all in the high 85s, they're pushing towards that 90%. But for a lot of farmers, there is room for improvement. So as I say, if you could move your herd from say 66% to by 5% up to say 71%, okay? That 5%, that could be achieved just by synchronizing the heifers and getting them to calve down in the first couple of weeks of the calving period. I mean, that could be all it takes to move 5%. But if you had a 100-cow herd, you're getting based by improving by 1%, you get €8, just over €8 a cow. So if you manage to improve by 5%, that would be 40. That's you're looking at €4,000. There'd be €4,000 in it for a dairy farmer to improve his herd there. So there is some significant financial advantages in tightening this pattern up. But I also appreciate there's quite a lot of work to achieve it, i.e. getting the heifers grown properly, and then when the reality hits and you've got all those calves on the ground, there's quite a lot of work to be done there as well.
Can I just throw in one caveat on that one, Jerry, is that we often look at that overall herd calving rate to get to 90%, and I don't know if this is your experience, Michael, as well. The heifers often create that, or they bump that up. But we got to be very careful and split out the mature cows, and that you're not letting the 6-week calving rate slip on the mature cows, because we want them, the mature cow group, over the second lactation on to do it in 70% of those in 6 weeks, because the heifers will bring that up. So we can sometimes mask fertility issues inside in a herd by constantly pumping in heifers. So make sure you split it out, and that maybe is the experience from the veterinary side, is what you see is, are we treating those cows? Are we getting those cows back into action?
But also from a farmer point of view, I suppose, obviously having your heifers calved early is very important, but as Martin said, if you can have those later calved cows calving early also, they're the ones that are going to make you money, because they're mature cows, they can milk well, whereas a heifer, she's young, she's not a full cow yet, so she can't make as much money for you for the year as a mature cow can. So having that mature cow calved early also is vital.
And with changing times and regulations, farmers are being told how many animals they can keep. So keeping your replacement rate to a low level as possible is going to be beneficial to you as a farmer. Charles, you wanted to come in?
But then another point is that if a heifer calf is born early, it's going to be easier to rear. So it's going to be more likely to be an early calving heifer. If we've got an early calving heifer, she's more likely to have more time to recover to become an early calving cow. So the whole herd is going to become more sustainable. So they're going to have more time to recover from the calving process. And that's, at the end of the day, those older cows write the checks. They're the ones who really drive the profit. So we need to have them. But as I say, the quick fix, as Martin has pointed out, is the heifers. But ultimately, those early calving heifers become early calving cows, which hopefully stay on the farm and don't drop out of the system.
So in terms of helping our audience decide what may or may not work on their farm, Michael, would you have any comment on what have you found to be the best aspects of using sex, semen and synchronization programs?
Well, I suppose, firstly, as Charles has just said, so last year was my first time synchronizing my my heifers, and I can see, you know, as of now, we'll say, I can't tell you exactly, but I would say that most of those heifers that calved early have been bulling already this year. Now, be it a lot of the time it's been bulling indoors with the weather and so on has been a challenge, but at least when it comes to breeding those heifers at the start of May, they will have had a heat or maybe 2 heats over them, which obviously will give them more of a chance of coming in calf again this year. As regards the benefits, I suppose that's one huge one, but also I suppose having those heifers in your parlour early at a time of the year when you're not yet at full tilt, you're not yet crazy busy, you can give those heifers a little bit of extra time in the parlour. Similarly with those calves, you can give them a little bit of extra time, whereas if they were being born now, every calf shed is full to the brim and under pressure. It just gives both cow and calf extra time and extra chance of either coming in calf again or becoming your heifer that will arrive in the parlour in 2 years' time.
Very good. And Mary-Louise, Michael mentioned the challenging conditions that are there this year, and it's evident for everybody to see those. But in terms of helping farmers to plan ahead for the breeding season, what advice would you give at this point for dealing with the cows and dealing with a herd to get as many of them as possible bulling?
Yes, so I suppose we're 5 weeks away from the breeding season at this point. Today's 21st of March, so we're getting there quickly. I suppose the first thing to do is, given how challenging a spring it has been, is probably body condition score the cows. Identify the thin cows, get them on once a day milking, get them into the parlour the second time and give them that extra bit of feed. And I suppose if you haven't ventured out to grass yet, even a couple of hours a day out on grass will help these cows along as well. If your heifers are a bit light, you still have a few weeks to try and push them on. You're not going to make huge ground with them, but you'll do a little bit and get them a bit closer to target.
Very good. And Michael, at what stage would you start pre-breeding heat detections? Or?
So traditionally, Jerry, we were tail painting at home, and when we were doing that, we were tail painting from the start of April, I suppose, for about 3.5 weeks. After that, then I would call vets and we would scan any cows that hadn't been seen bulling. But I put collars on the cows last year, and so to be honest with you, that's doing my pre-breeding for me. As such, I can pull up on my phone any cows that haven't been seen bulling. So I suppose look at your pre-breeding from now really, and anyone that's coming bulling, you're taking note for, or your phone is taking note for. So it's kind of an ongoing process from when the cow calves to when you're mating them almost, you know.
Excellent. And Martin, in terms of engaging with farmers or farmers engaging with their AI company at this point?
Yeah, I mean, look, and we have to be conscious, and again, I think it's just important, we're not saying that everybody has to go down this particular path, but what we do see is that there is an increased demand for heifer synchronization programs and sex early on in the season. From the AI point of view, if you remember, when we hit peak day of AI, probably 5th, 6th of May, probably 11 to 12,000 starves are done on that one day. It's a huge pressure within the AI system to get the job done. So if we can do those sync programs a little bit earlier before the peak season kicks off, very important. So talk to your AI tech. Often we can get them set up early, even if you have a lot of heifers to do or you have a bunch of cows that you want to do as well. We can organise a couple of techs to come in. So the sooner you talk to us, the better. And one thing we want to flag up with people now at the moment, with the rate of sale of sex semen at the minute, bulls of choice may be selling out. People really need to start talking to people. We're seeing an upsurge again of around 20% at the moment on sex. So there is a demand. So the sooner you start talking to people, the better.
Great. So planning ahead is very important.
Plan. Yeah, absolutely.
Plan. So our next video was on pre-breeding work.
The heat detection that we're using on this farm is heat and health monitoring collars. I find them very good. Last year was my first year using them. I suppose previously to that we were using tail paint, and that was working quite well also, but using the collars, it's a much more labour saving tool. I work a little bit off farm as well, so while I was tail painting cows in the morning and evening, I'd have to be getting up and I'd have to be, you know, watching cows, bringing in cows, and also watching them during milking to see what cows were bulling that day. So these heat monitoring collars have definitely taken that labour element out of that. You know, I can just bring in the cows, and after the cows started, I can then check my phone to see what cows are bulling that morning or that evening, and I can draft those cows then accordingly. Previously, when I was using tail paint, we were tail painting maybe around the first week of April just to check on pre-breeding, and I tail paint maybe for 3.5 weeks, and then I would call the vets, and any cows that weren't seeing bulling were scanned. Whereas now with the collars, my collars will give me a list of cows that haven't been bulling, and I can draft those cows out and call the vet, and the vet can scan those cows then. Any problem cows obviously will be seen by the vet. If Mary Louise or whoever is advocating that that cow will be washed out or put on a programme, then I'll be doing that also.
With new technology, there's been a big change in the management of non-bullers. Farmers have become very proactive in terms of intervening pre-breeding. We've seen a massive increase in scanning these non-bullers before breeding starts. We no longer do whole herd pre-breed scans. It's very much targeted at those cows who have not been seen cycling or cows who've had issues over the course of the spring as well. My top tips for vasectomizing a bull would be to get it done as soon as possible. You know, keep them as well fed as you possibly can, have them as well grown as you possibly can. If they're too light, they'll get hurt, so it's important to have them very well grown, and the sooner they're done in spring, the quicker you can get them out to cows when the time comes. You need 6 weeks between having a bull vasectomized and when he's safe to use. Getting the bull used to a chin ball marker is also very important. Put the chin ball on him before you let him off with the cows. Don't put any paint on it so he's used to it, so that when he does go to cows or heifers that he doesn't destroy the whole place in paint and you can't decipher what's bulling and what's not. When I first like to get involved for breeding is the previous summer when I'm scanning cows, and start the conversation about improving conception rate to first service, improving submission rates, and getting cows calving within a 6-week pattern. Then in spring, as soon as I can, I start mentioning breeding. If there's any issues ongoing on the farm, we try and get those resolved as quickly as we can for breeding, because you have a very short window to get cows back in calf. So the main conversation will start in March, lining up non-bullers and synchronising programmes for April, and then as we go, we'll deal with any issues that appear. For non-seam bullers, pre-mating start date, I certainly advocate using fixed time AI and sync programs, because those cows generally are cows with issues. So by using sync programs, you're able to rectify that, as well as using fixed time AI. It takes the guesswork out of heat times and standing and heat detection. It also, those non-seam bullers are generally the later calvers, so by synchronising them and using fixed time AI, you bring them back and you get them back calving in February.
Graham, there's lots and lots of talk about using sex semen. What are the benefits that you're selling or you're seeing at farm level about the use of sexed?
So the benefits we're seeing at farmers, I suppose they want to get their heifers from the best genetic mare cows and heifers. They want to get their heifer replacements. So they're able to focus their breeding program more intensely on those animals. I suppose it allows them to increase the use of dairy beef, obviously using short gestation, easy calving there again. So it's adding calf value on the farm for that farmer and reducing the number of dairy bull calves.
What sort of type of bulls are we putting in for dairy beef on AI?
As breed-wise, Hereford Angus would be the main portion.
Okay.
Some guys have specific markets. They have people that want Belgian Blues or they want Charleys, and we're keeping the easy calving in mind at all times. And you know, with strategic use in the breeding season, you can use, along with sex semen, you can use some of those probably not so much short gestation bulls without harming your calving spread.
Yeah, and I suppose that's a key thing, is again making that decision at the start. We've got cows for sexed, but even in that first week of the breeding season, we'll have cows in there for beef. And again, we can use maybe some of those longer gestation bulls to the higher value calf again that isn't causing us a problem. So if we pick the breed we want, we make sure we're easy calving, we make sure we're short gestation, and we're really looking for that high beef index. Those are kind of the three elements that we were looking at dairy beef. When we're using sex, Graham, and again, it's a more fragile biological product, we always consider it's about 90% purity. So 9 out of 10 calves born from sexed are going to be female on average. We're also looking at a situation that the conception rate from sexed is roughly going to be about 85% of what you get from conventional. So what are the couple of key things in terms of maybe herd selection and in terms of cow selection that we need to be careful of when we're using sexed?
I suppose, yeah, from a herd selection point of view, a farmer might be interested in using sexed, but like we have to be careful, I suppose, then if it's his first year using it, we need to maybe take a dip to toe approach. Yeah. Perhaps maybe sync some cows on a fixed time program, see how he gets on. If we feel we're comfortable heat detection and all that, we can probably move it up a step the following year. Okay. Another thing, I suppose, is cow selection, individual cow selection. We try to go through ICBF reports and pick out cows that generally hold to the first service. Cows that have had no issue through the spring, cows that are calved plus 42 days before the start of breeding. And you know, that's basically where you're kind of, the cows kind of pick themselves, if you know what I mean.
I understand. So we're really looking at those best genetic merit cows, but best fertility cows, calve long enough, cows in good enough body condition, had a clean calving. So that's down to individual cow selection. Any comment about the heat detection and timing, Graham, because we do have a different requirement with sexed.
To use sex semen on a cow using natural heat, I suppose we're looking at that window of 16 to 20 hours after the onset of heat. So basically if a technician or a farmer is AI in a cow and she's still in heat, so we just have to pick a broader bunch of cows. So if he's using, just say for example, 10 sex straws, we might need to pick 15 or 18 or 20 cows. Absolutely. So that on a once a day call system, on the law of averages, he's going to get those 10 sex straws used.
Yeah, so a bit of planning again. It's really back to that idea that we're talking about all the time. If we plan ahead, we can get the best use out of using something like sexed, so we get value for that expenditure and we get the result from it.
Mary-Louise, for a period, whole herd pre-breeding scanning was popular. Have you seen a change in this in recent years?
Absolutely, Jerry. Since the advent of collars and heat detection aids, it's definitely changed to much more targeted pre-breeding scanning. You know, guys very easily have a list now on their phone that tells them what needs to be scanned. So along with non-seam bullers, then they can add in any cows who had issues over the course of the spring, heart calvings, LDAs, milk fevers, things like that. And there's been, like, they're really focusing on cows that they think have an issue, as opposed to doing a whole herd scan where 90% of the cows may have no problem at all.
Perfect. And at what point do you advise your clients to intervene with these problem cows?
Oh, certainly pre-breeding. So from the second, third week of April, depending on when you start breeding, to allow maybe 10 days before that, so that if any of these cows need to be put on synchronization programs to get them bulling and cycling, or if they need to be washed out or anything like that, that they have time to do that before the start of breeding, so that they're cycling within the first couple of days of the breeding season.
Excellent. And Charles, is there any evidence then, we get often asked on farm about whether the fertility from a synchronized heat equates to the fertility from a natural heat. Would you have any comments on that?
Yes, and I mean, I know where that question is coming from, because I mean, certainly back in the day when I started working, we used to use CEDAs and progesterone devices, and synchronization was for problem cows. So it was always the problems, you know, the not seen bulling, in fairness, the ones that Mary-Louise has just been talking about. And we didn't use them in healthy cows. You know, we didn't do this synchronization per se. It was basically cows that hadn't been seen bulling, or late cows, that they were all those ones. And they were intrinsically less fertile animals. So as a result, it's got into people's minds that, oh, the fertility must be less good if it's been induced by synchronization. The reality, actually, when they did a lot of work there at Moore Park a number of years back with large numbers of cows, and this was looking at cows, and they were looking at both fertility from observed heats, i.e. just the control group, which would be what we normally do, go out there with tail paint, etc., and pick those up. And they compared those to ones that had actually been put on a synchronization program using a progesterone device like a CEDA, and then they were then observed, okay? So you're comparing ones that have been induced but are being observed, okay, versus animals that had just been normally picked up. And actually, the ones that had been synchronized were in fact were more fertile, which is what we should probably expect as well, because the reason we use these devices, these progesterone devices, we're actually mimicking a corpus luteum, which is what is produced after an animal cycles, and that level of progesterone improves the fertility of the animal. And that's why these cows that calve early have a number of cycles, which means they have a number of corpus luteums, have a number of progesterone exposures, and as a result are more fertile. So what we're doing in taking these cows, we're effectively mimicking that and making sure they have plenty of progesterone in them, and that gives us a more fertile heat.
Absolutely, and the importance of pre-breeding heats can't be underestimated. And as was going back to your heifers, Michael, you mentioned the heifers, that they will have, when they're well grown, they're likely to have cycled a number of times, and the second and subsequent heats are more fertile than the earlier heats. So, Martin, in terms of semen usage, have you seen a change in pattern in what farmers are looking for?
Yeah, there's been a big shift Jerry, in the past 2 years, I mean, we now view sex semen as what we would call a disruptive technology as such, because it will displace a certain amount of conventional dairy out of it. We saw a significant increase 2 years ago, kind of doubled again into last year, then calmed down as such, but now there's been an extra bite on again. So I suppose the ambition within the country is that we get somewhere between like 250,000 straws used. We're still away from that. We're probably edging towards getting into the maybe 170,000, 180,000 straws getting used this year. We could see that happening in terms of sex. So the dynamics of it is definitely changing, and that leads then to quite a lot more dairy beef. So our business is shifting into providing sex semen and providing dairy beef, and we're kind of catching up with that technology as a business as the farmer demand is increasing. And sex has its challenges because we'll stop producing sex effectively within the next week or so. All that semen will go into a quarantine period before it's used. It's used at a relatively short space of time at the start of the season. So sex semen has been produced from probably last August, but we have to follow through with the bulls and watch the different changes in the EBI, and watch the bull proof. So the level of planning and forecasting we have to do with sexed is much more complex than if we're handling conventional semen, and that's why it is, as we say, it's a lot more expensive, it is disruptive, and it does require forecast.
And traditionally, it would have been estimated that it took over five straws per heifer in the parlour. With the use of sex semen, how can we hope to reduce that number?
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically with the conception rates we are achieving, and I think there's been a lot of kind of, we've been cautious about conception rates, but in fairness to farmers who've been using it, they've been selecting cows really well, the good body conditions cows cycle, calve long enough, and so on. And in general, quite a lot of our herds in Ireland are fertile. So we have very good fertility as a national herd per se. So conception rates have been very good. And some farms will achieve 60% conception rates with sexed. So 2 straws is delivering a heifer in many cases. Often a question we get a farmer down the road, oh God, I got 3 or 4 bulls, I used 10 sex straws, that sex semen is no good. We got to work with the law of averages here. If we're going to use a couple of thousand straws of sexed and it is 90%, and say there's 1,000, there's going to be 100 calves that are males, unfortunately, and someone is going to get them. So those elements just upset people about using sexed. But I'd be confident using it, pick the cows well, and we use far less dairy semen.
So you're using your high fertile cows, your young cows that are in good body condition.
Yeah, and even Jerry, in fairness to the cows, 4th, 5th lactation, cycling well, they're clean. Again, a bit of veterinary intervention, we've no problem with that. Sometimes in the first lactations, be careful if they're not gaining body condition or they're not coating off well. But I think your vet can advise you really strongly on that individual cow selection. From my point of view, from a genetics point of view, pick the cows you want to have in your herd to produce daughters. So the cows you like, first of all, and then start looking at their numbers in terms of their milk recordings and so on.
Excellent. And when we're using sex semen, why don't we use sex semen when cows are still on heat?
Look, it's because in the sorting process, effectively the sperm cells are more ready to go by the time they get in the cow. So we need to be closer to the ovulation of the egg. And that's why fixed time programs work well. It's well timed. And from that point of view, you can kind of nail that egg a little bit better. So that's why we have to go towards the end of the heat, closer to the ovulation point, because that's when our sex semen sperm cells are ready.
Excellent. And Mary-Louise, in terms of the problem cows again, when do you expect to start seeing problem cows on farm?
I'd say 2nd, 3rd week of April it'll start. 2nd week probably of April. Yeah. Some people who calve in the end of January will be checking them out then. When
we have a challenging year like 2024 is to date, it's quite likely that in a year like this, work that's done now a few weeks out will pay dividends in terms of number of cows showing heat.
Absolutely. When so many cows have been in for so long, in some places cows have been in up on 6 months. So, seeing heat in those cows is going to be quite a challenge as well. So any cows who have had issues are definitely worth lining up now. The other thing is, cows have been in a long time. A lot of places haven't enough feed space. First calf heifers under a bit of pressure. It's important to try and actually identify anyone you haven't seen bulling and get them sorted.
Yeah. And Michael, to go back on the collars again, you have found them to be very beneficial as a farmer.
I have, Jerry. I suppose it has only been my first year using them last year, but what I've seen in terms of picking up even silent heats that I wouldn't have noticed with tail paint. Collars seem to be able to do that also. Look, more than anything else, it's a labour-saving tool for me. It prevents me having to jump up and down in between rows in the parlour, and checking cows when they're at the gap coming in, and also checking them maybe last thing at night or during the day. It's a huge labour-saving tool. You know, it's like it saves time that you can be doing something else, and it also does the job excellently for you.
Yeah.
The one thing I'd probably add into it, Jerry, and I think again we need to be careful, because a lot of people are doing, you know, very good manual heat detection out there, and they're using an AI technician coming once a day, and we often get really bogged down the timing, and it must be so exact with sex and so on. But actually, you know, once a day systems with good heat detection and picking up that cow will work well. The attention to detail has to be there, of course, but it will work well from that point of view. And we really look at it as if we can get that AI technician into the yard and you have enough cows selected, you will knock them out for sex. It'll be fine. So from that point of view, take a bit of confidence from that as well. We don't have to get so bogged down in the minute detail. We can really run this across the general herd with some good first principles. It's very important. I mean, from our point of view, again, we're very careful about selecting bulls for sex. They've good field fertility. We're not selecting G1s. We're using 4M Ultra Plus. We're trying to weigh everything in the favour of getting that cow and calf. So, you know, fit in those heat detection systems, manual or otherwise, fit in your vet into that, and the results can be very satisfactory.
Excellent. Our next video, folks, is focusing on synchronizing heifers and the options that are available to you as a farmer.
So a lot of our farmers are weighing heifers. It very much depends on the farmer as to how often he weighs the heifers. Ideally, I would like farmers to truly establish their weight gains and their potential of their heifers to start at birth if possible, before weaning, sometime during the summer, pre-housing them to establish where their heifers are at before it's too late for breeding. And then ideally, you know, if guys have their heifers at a target of 30% of mature body weight at 6 months. At breeding, they want it to be 60% mature body weight and 90% of mature body weight at calving down. Now, those weights will vary hugely as to whether you have a Holstein herd, a black and white herd, or Jersey cross herd. And your breeding weights for heifers can be anywhere from 360 down to 300 kilos, depending on that. In the last few years, we've seen a massive increase in farmers synchronizing heifers like Michael has. Most farmers, once they have started the process, continue it year on year and have seen great success with that. Farmers really like using the synchronizing program. It reduces the labour that they need on farm, it reduces the handling times of heifers, it makes sure that their repeats are close together, and it allows them to use the best semen on their heifers and get heifers from those heifers, improving the genetic merit of their herds very quickly.
Last year was the first year that I've been synchronising my heifers. I suppose I've been thinking about it for the last year or two, and I would have had a conversation with Mary Louise around it leading up to it. So when we spoke about it, she maybe advised that we would synchronise all the heifers and use sex semen on roughly half of the heifers. So half my heifers got sex semen and the other half got conventional Angus semen. I suppose the reasons why I started it were same as everybody else. This is predominantly a dairy herd, although we are keeping our calves as well. I want to get as many heifers on the ground early as possible, and so look to eliminate to a certain extent the dairy bred bull calf. I found it to be a success this year anyway. My conception rate to sex semen was 63%. It was actually higher than my conception rate to the conventional Angus, which was 56%. So look, from that point of view, I'm very happy with it. My plan going forward would probably be to do the same again, or else possibly to do all sex semen on the heifers. I'll have that conversation with Mary Louise coming towards the breeding season and decide on that then. For the repeats, on day 17 I put scratch cards on the heifers, and I also used crayons on them as well, just as a kind of a belt and braces technique. Because it was my first year doing it, I said I'd use the crayons also. On day 17 those went on, and then the repeats started coming in. The next number of days after that, my AI technician would have served all those repeats to conventional Angus. On the third round then, I just felt that it was obviously more labour then as the time was going on, so I just decided to put in our own stock bull. He stayed in for those 3 weeks, and at the end of 3 weeks he picked up those repeats, and after that he was pulled.
Ben, when we're setting up a synchronization for a group of heifers and you're planning to do this, how do we set it up? What's the best way to get this going?
Well, to get it started, the most important thing to do is to ring your vets, organise them to come out, but they've got to make contact with the technician through you to make sure that they're available to do that synchronisation on the day that you want. If not, you'll have to move it about. Obviously, timing is crucial. When you're putting in seeders and spending a lot of money on drugs, you don't want to be messing up the time that they're going to be able to come and do it.
So it's expensive, and again, we're probably looking at getting these syncs done at peak or close to peak. So when would you like them to start? Do you want to start a little bit pre-season, and is morning, afternoon, how are the times panning out for you?
Yeah, look, I suppose there's so many farms that we're dealing with. The earlier that a farmer can go before peak, the better. And all technicians will tell you that. Afternoons are better because obviously they've got their morning run to do with the cows. So after lunch is the best time. And they'll get their last injection first thing in the morning. Then the farm will be ready for you when you come.
So those heifers are going to get their last shot of GnRH in the morning, and they're going to be ready to take on generally sexed in the afternoon when we're looking at these sex syncs.
That's right. You can move it around. There's some technicians that'll be able to do things first thing in the morning and last thing at night. As a general rule, most technicians would prefer it if you had it arranged for the afternoon.
When we're looking at these larger numbers and getting a lot of heifers in, and a lot of those heifers are bulling at that particular time, what sort of help do you need, Ben? How should this be set up from the farmer's point of view, facilities and so on?
Well, facilities are key and labour is key. Farmers can be interested in doing a fixed time, but if they haven't got decent facilities, it's very difficult to get right. Depending on the numbers of heifers you've got, I'll just give you an example. If you were doing 30 heifers and you were using 3 different bulls, 10 of each, in an ideal world, the farmer would have those 3 lots of 10 in separate yards around the pens there, so you can come in, do 10 with one bull, 10 with the second bull, 10 with the third bull. It will optimize your conception rate. You'll get them done so much quicker than having to stop each time and having see what bull that particular heifer is going to get. Labor is key as well. The more help you have on a synchronization of people that know what they're doing, the easier it is.
The other thing about it is, even on safety, like we're dealing with larger groups all the time, we're dealing with less help. In terms of safety for the tech and for the farmer and for the animal, any tips or advice in there, Ben?
Yeah, well, obviously the condition of the yards and the crush is crucial. The technician really, all he or she needs to be doing is loading the guns and AIing the cow or the heifer. They don't want to be jumping over barriers, going and running around after heifers. When you get to the bigger numbers, and I'm talking people that might have 100 heifers to do, if they've got them in groups and they're grazing them in groups, then ideally, when they're doing their different injections throughout the program and pulling of the seeder, if they do each group in the same order each time and AI them in the same order, there again, you're going to get that optimum conception rate.
Okay, so you're really getting the benefit of making sure the drugs are following the time sequence, have that worked out with the vet. The animals are following the time sequence, so we actually get the AI piece of it right. And I see that there's a certain number of very large syncs that we do as a company, where we'll put in 2 and 3 techs in. We'll put in someone maybe who's loading, someone who's actually recording, to get the most out of it, because it's an expensive business, and yet we can achieve very, very high results with it.
Yeah, correct.
We've done our sync. We're hopeful we're 60% plus on conception rate, all things being equal. We're going to have a bunch of repeats coming back at us probably 18 to 24 days later after that first serve. How should we approach that? That could be a significant bunch of animals in that one period of time.
Well, as you say, after the sync, we've let the bulls out the next day, and then what I would suggest to do is after day 17, pull the bulls out, put scratch cards on all the heifers, then over the next few days, till it tails off down to having 1 or none in a day, AI your repeats. A young bull will not do more than 1 or 2 in a day, so if he has half a dozen to do, you're going to miss them, and that crucial three weeks missed again. Each year that goes on, the technology going forward and organisation and all these little things are improving it year on year.
I'm going to leave it one last thing. Put down a bit of sand in the crush in the yard, and we get a pile of grip, and we don't get them falling over, and it certainly can help.
That's right.
Using seeders and heifers, and it actually applies to cows as well, we need to be very conscious about hygiene when we're putting the seeders in.
It's really important because when we put a device into the vagina of an animal, it's going to produce a discharge, whatever you do. But if it's dirty going in, or if any dirt gets in at that point, there's going to be even more discharge. And this is really significant when we remove it in 6 days or 8 days, depending on the program, because the next thing that's going to happen is about 48 hours later, the technician is going to have to then serve these cows and heifers. So it's really important that when they go in, they're clean, the vulva's clean, and to be honest with you, it's much easier to do with 2 of you, one person holding the tails to one side and the other one cleaning up the vulval lips. The other point, which is really specific more probably to heifers than to cows, is heifers are the divil for removing cedars. So it's really important to cut the blue strings off short. And I'd always cut them off level with the vulval lips. And to be honest, if the heifer's going to be inside on a slatted pen, I'd even consider removing the strings altogether and just accept you're going to have to insert a clean gloved hand to remove the cedars.
Michael, last year you synced all your heifers and you used sex semen in half of them. How did you get on, and have you made any changes in what you want to do with your heifers for 2024?
Yeah, so last year, Jerry, I presume people can remember that, I suppose, last March and April were poor weather-wise, so my own heifers didn't get a great chance, didn't get a great start, I felt. So my plan was that I would synchronise all the heifers and just use sex on half of them. I felt some of them weren't quite up to scratch last year, number one, but number two, when I'm keeping my calves, I suppose putting half of them in calf to Angus didn't bother me because I knew I'd be keeping those calves anyway. And I suppose with that in mind, this year we've changed tack slightly. I suppose we were very conscious of heifers meeting the target weights. So I feel this year that my heifers are a lot stronger than what they were this time last year. Now, in saying that, they haven't yet been out because of the spring that we've had, but I'd definitely be more confident that this year they're in better nick, you know. And I suppose with that in mind, my plan at the moment is to again synchronise all the heifers and use sex on them all and see how I go. I was confident. I was quite happy with the results last year. Look, as I said in the video, that my conception rate to sex was even slightly better. I suppose, as I said, some of those heifers were a little bit small. So sorry, some of the heifers that got Angus were a little bit small. But no, this year I'd be more confident on using sex on all of those heifers, you know.
Excellent. And we spoke, Mary Louise, earlier you spoke about the importance of weighing heifers. Charles, would you have any comments on the significance of managing the heifers properly and getting the heifers ready for coming into their first season breeding?
Well, I suppose, I mean, in a way, what's going on farms right now is impacting the fertility of next season, because, you know, those heifer calves that are on the ground at the minute, okay, and how we've been rearing those calves and how farmers have been rearing those calves over the last sort of 6 weeks, 2 months is critical, because those calves that grow fastest in that first 2-month period have been shown to be more likely to go in calf the second time and the first time. They're also going to drive more milk as well. So, you know, this early calf rearing is absolutely crucial. And then after that, we can play catch up at grass, and we can play catch up in their first winter when we can feed them. But this, you know, if heifer calves are done poorly now, it will have an impact not only in next year, but the following year as well, because they're less likely to go in calf for a second time. So we can't overemphasize the importance of keeping heifers healthy and rearing them properly. So it comes down to all those management things about feeding, you know, using vaccination, good calf house design and everything. And in fairness, using jackets, which you've seen in the videos there as well. I mean, those jackets definitely would help improve growth rates and keep heifer calves healthy as well. But that, I know that's a calf rearing conversation, but actually it's going to affect you now. And in a way, Michael is saying that because what he was saying earlier on was the fact that, you know, last year's heifers weren't quite as good for various reasons. You put a lot of emphasis on it this time, and I'm talking to your father the other day. He was emphasising the importance of, you know, vaccinating them as calves, vaccinating before it came into the shed to reduce the chance of them getting any diseases at all. Because as soon as they get disease, they're dropping back. So that'd be my point on that side of it, yeah.
So we've got to keep the heifer calf moving forward all the time, so that she reaches her targets.
Healthy. Keep it healthy too.
Keep them healthy, yeah. And Mary Louise, in terms of managing these heifers post-AI, have you any comments to make on?
I suppose the first thing is keep them in their groups, and a few days after they've been AI'd, to let off your bulls with the heifers, because there's always a few of them that won't have read the rule book, and you'll have some odd heats at day 10. Come day 17, pull out the bulls again. It's really important that the bulls are taken away, because they're not going to be capable of bulling these heifers, because there is the potential to be 40-50% of them repeating in a very short space of time. So pull out the bulls. When you have the heifers in the yard, put scratch cards on them. That'll aid your heat detection. And I think when you've gone to the effort of synchronising heifers, it's really important to AI the repeats as well, because they're still only 3 weeks into the breeding season at that point, and you still have a chance of getting some more heifers out of that. I wouldn't say use sext on those repeats though, but use conventional semen on them.
Absolutely. So farmers have made a big investment in product and getting their heifers synchronized. So the importance of managing the repeats and the volume of repeats that come in a short space of time, and having adequate bull power or AI to manage that. Martin, would you have any comment on how to manage that?
Yeah, exactly as Marie-Louise is saying, and bull power is something that comes up all the time. We see it, and even though we're an AI company, we're so conscious of the fact that we can get you can get such poor results when you're doing a level of AI inside in herds, and then you come into herds where they've done maybe 6 weeks of AI and the herd is relatively large and they don't put out enough bulls, and we just get an empty rate then that gets kicked back into a problem that was with AI. But we see it constantly, bull power is an issue, and I suppose more and more on farms, while we like to use bulls because of labour issues, unless you have enough of them and they're healthy enough, and the level of lameness that happens in bulls is very, very significant, and a lame bull in a spring seasonal system with cow's bulling is an absolute disaster. So all those things have an impact, and the vet's involvement, I think, right the way through the breeding season, and on the male fertility side, is enormously important, because we also have to remember too that the whole bunch of those bulls out there are subfertile, not necessarily not fertile, but subfertile. And as Ben was saying in the video, you can get one young bull, he might do one animal, but if he's subfertile, he's not going to get the next one the following day, and again you get a bump there. So your investment is really getting hammered. So I certainly, back to your vet to talk about bull fertility in the field. It's very important.
Speaking of the vet and bull fertility, Marie-Louise, in practice in the last number of years, there's an increasing demand for bull breeding examination, bull breeding soundness examination. So what comments would you have to add to Martin's?
Well, I think it's crucial. Like, if you're buying in a new bull, you have to remember that these bulls are maybe 14 months old, and you need to check them to make sure they are fertile. Are they mature enough? You may have plenty of sperm in a sample, but there may be issues with that sperm within the sample. It's important to check your bulls every year. Just because he was fertile last year doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be fertile this year. So I think the role of the bull breeding soundness examination is of increasing importance. We're chasing this 6-week calving rate, and trying to calve cows in 10 to 12 weeks. So having your bulls, the bulls you have that are fertile, is really important, and identifying any other issues, because it's not just a fertility test. So it is really important to do that before breeding, and it is of increasing demand every year to do that, even though I would imagine the amount of stock bulls on the ground is probably decreasing with the use of AI.
Absolutely, and what we notice on a number of farms is farmers may use chin balls, and to help the bull, sometimes we see farmers that will AI in addition to the bull.
Yeah.
So they're using the bull for heat detection.
Our recommendation will always be to continue, even when bulls go into a herd, continue AI for another 10, 14 days. And it sounds like, AI companies selling straws. The point is here is, again, we're trying everything we can to maximise the outcomes. And last year was kind of an interesting year in certain parts of the country, like weather effects. I don't know if you experienced it, Michael, with very good Feb. March, April was a struggle. And we ended up in a situation where we got slow calving outcomes in a bunch of herds running into 24. So the weather effects can be pretty significant, Michael.
Yeah, like I mean, just talking to some friends of mine, that they would have commented on that maybe this time last year or so, they would have had a lot more cows calved than they currently have. Just that maybe conception rate for service last year wasn't as high as what it could have been. And I suppose, look, remembering back, weather in March, April was very poor last year. and cows had to be rehoused in some cases and so on. So that would have definitely had an effect on that, you know.
The other point about that is the fact that we're expecting that these animals have got to show signs of bulling. When it's wet and miserable and grazing conditions aren't as good, they won't show as much activity. Now, you can have collars on them, but all the collars are doing is measuring the amount of activity. If the animal's feeling miserable and isn't actually showing any activity, it's not some magic thing that's looking at the ovaries or anything like that. It is actually waiting for that activity to happen. So in the same way as a lame animal isn't going to show great signs of heat, but also an animal that's miserable doesn't show as much signs of heat as well. So that was challenging last year, and it might be challenging this year too. I mean, we'll just have to see what happens.
And the higher production animal, that's more likely to be a factor.
Absolutely.
A lot of energy is going into trying to produce milk and maintain themselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there's very much a different dynamic, and we see even the genetic shift in some herds as people are looking at, even though volumes are probably being controlled from a genetic point of view in animals are not being increased steadily, the overall solids production in the cows is increasing. So energy demands in our cows are very good. The vast majority of people listening to this have very, very good cows. And the energy demand out there is very, very significant. So we're challenged. So having a vet coming in a situation, that objective role, particularly when you're busy after the whole calving event, rearing calving, all that sort of stuff, have another pair of eyes in there to have a look, I think is very important.
absolutely. And when Mary Louise and other vets are called in to look at problem cows, that's an opportunity to have an input into these situations that may be bubbling on the surface.
It is, of course, and you have to remember too that farmers are tired. They've put in a tough spring weather-wise. They've put in a pile of work. They're short labour, so we are there to help, and we're not there to criticise as such.
Absolutely. And in terms of managing the groups of heifers, then an issue we see with larger groups is, I suppose, you've safety and for the animal and the operator. So would you have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, I'm conscious of the army of AI technicians out there and the demands in terms of when we get even large groups of cows bulling in that early part of the season and that high demand. So help available is very important for the safety of everybody involved in getting a good job done. I can't emphasize that enough. Look at the facilities you're working in. Can cows be separated out, handled properly? What is the risk? Cows piling up crushes in behind people, all these things happen. For the cows themselves, animals themselves, heifers, good grippy yards if they need to be grooved, yeah, but a simple solution all the time. A little bit of sand on top of that concrete makes an enormous difference and stops a couple of injuries and so on. So I think we need to be cognizant of it, we need to be aware of it, and we know from the busyness of the AI technicians that little bit of help, being present, gets them in and out of the yard, gets the job done, and actually we can definitely see better conception rates where technicians have a little bit of assistance.
And absolutely, and the role of the technician is vital in this, so he is the critical factor in all of this, so making everything as easy as possible that he can do his job, because your farmer has come along and he's invested in the program, he's put time and effort and money into it. So actually, the guy that's going to decide the outcomes, making everything as easy as possible and giving him the best chance of success is critical.
Yeah, look, it's a natural process. There's a certain amount of things that we can control within it. So let's try and control as much as we can.
Yes.
And I'm conscious, obviously, of protecting the group of people out there as well. But for the farmer to get the outcome, yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose another factor in all of this then is that we're going to move on to next is the dealing with the late cows and how you can intervene at this point as a farmer and what you can do to try and tighten up the late cows and prevent these cows from falling off the back of the lorry and becoming your cull cows next year.
In the last few years, I've seen a big increase in farmers asking about tightening up late calvers, especially cows calving after St. Patrick's Day. The tolerance for late calving is diminishing year on year. So what I like to do with those cows is once they're 30 to 35 days calved, I'll scan them, and if they are suitable, then I will synchronise them and put them on a fixed time AI program to tighten them up.
Late calvers are intrinsically poor fertility. in that they were obviously late this year and they have a danger of falling out the herd if we don't actively manage them. So certainly synchronization is a possibility here. One of the things about an early calving cow is it has repeated heats and before it comes to the breeding period. And as a result, each time it has a heat, it throws up a CL, corpus luteum, and that produces progesterone. And that's the reason why when she finally gets served, she has better fertility than a late calver who, because she's calving late, has less chances to have the repeated heats. And that's where synchronization using a progesterone device like a CEDA could certainly help. The other thing with these ones is that they're definitely cows that we should consider using fixed time AI on, in the sense that they have poorer fertility, so they're less likely to show strong heats. So certainly there's an opportunity here to synchronize those cows. They do want to be at least 30 days calved. We then put the devices in. They're then going to be bred sort of at 42 days plus, and then they'd be done on fixed time AI. And okay, we may only get a 50% conception rate. It's going to be a lower conception rate, but at least she's had a chance. Because if we leave them to their own devices, they may not come bulling at all, and they just drop out of the herd.
We get the cow's pregnancy scanned here. Usually we finish up breeding around the last week of July. So we'd wait usually to about a month, 5 weeks after that date, and then we would call the vets and we'd pregnancy scan then at that stage.
Mary Louise, for the late calvers, when you arrive on farm, what is your plan and how do you approach a group of late calvers with your farmers?
So late calving cows, you know, it obviously depends on what farm you're on as to what they consider late calvers, but I suppose they're generally going to be April calvers. So the cows that are calved 30 days, 35 days, I'll generally scan them to make sure there's no underlying issues. If there is, I'll address those, and otherwise then I will synchronize them and put them on a fixed time AI program. You know, if they do keep to that, you have the potential of bringing them back into March and possibly even the end of February if you're getting them at the very end of May.
The late calving cow on dairy farms this year, we see the numbers are very small, so in general they're very small. So Michael, on your experience, how do you like to approach?
Yeah, so I suppose the last couple of years, Jerry, what we've done at home is we've put those later calving cows on once a day. We found it to be a good success, to be fair. I found that it can not come back a couple of weeks or even a month. But what Mary Louise has said there, I think that would be my plan for this year. Any cow that's calved maybe from the first week of April on, if she hasn't been seen bulling within 30 days, my plan going forward is to get those cows scanned and possibly put them on a program as well, just to bring them back, because we're talking about 6-week calving rate, we're talking about days in milk and so on. That's what drives profit. So that'll be my plan for them this year, yeah.
Excellent. Charles, you want to add something?
Can I just comment on that? Because those late calving cows, often when we put them on a synchronization program and you've invested in that, I'd often get the comment that, well, they didn't come bulling. I didn't see them bulling. And in fairness, these later calving, they're intrinsically less fertile. But what I would say is if you invest in a synchronization program, you have to have the faith to stick with the fixed time AI. So we're not worried, the fact that they don't show any signs of heat isn't the issue. What the hormones are trying to do is make sure that the ovary is in the right condition, ovulating at the right time for when the semen is going to be delivered by the technician. And that's what fixed time AI means, okay? It doesn't matter that it didn't show signs of heat, if it's ovulated at that point, and that's what the hormones have gone and done. So I think it's worth emphasizing, particularly in these problem cows and later calving cows, because they're less likely to show good signs of heat, but they can still go and calve. And again, if we can get them served early, even though their conception rates aren't going to be as good, at least you get a second bite of the cherry, they'll repeat. And the other thing I've found over the many years of working with these sort of cows is farmers will often say when they do repeat, well, she didn't actually cycle the first time, but she did when she repeated, I could see it more. So you've got a better chance of picking up the repeats as well.
And frequently, as a vet in practice, I would have been asked to scan those cows 42 days later, and they say she hasn't shown any heat, and they have gone in calf without showing standing heat.
Yeah.
So sticking with the program is important.
Yeah, you do have to trust the process. It's
Trust,
really,
trust in the process is one of the buzzwords around at the moment. So, Martin, would you have any comment on the late cows and?
Yeah, look, and we see more and more, I suppose, again, from the AI technician service, you generally, they're not the primary piece, and often they're getting picked up on farms by bulls later and they drag on. But more and more we are seeing that request, and we're seeing kind of the piece where after 3 weeks into the breeding season, there's a little group of cows to sink. You know, and 3 weeks in again, another group when a vet is intervening. And so what we gradually can do is we can certainly pull a herd and pull a lot of those cows back. And it's down to what the farmer considers is a worthwhile investment. You have to have that discussion with your vet and see. I mean, again, like that's all conventional semen from our point of view. We put those cows in calf to beef, and I think again when you're working with your tech, depending on the busyness of the region, sometimes those little sinks can be organised so that we can pick them up in the evening. So I think you were talking about there, Jerry, is working backwards from the timing. Have a chat with your technician and say, okay, if I'm going to do a sink on those cows, when would suit to get them done? And often then you work that synchronization backwards. The vet will do the timing, and then everyone's accommodated with it, so it's not interfering with the morning run maybe for a particular technician, and you get the job done right.
Because these sync programs and the increase in the popularity of these sync programs has put the AI techs under a lot of pressure at different times.
Yeah. I think we're very lucky in our company. If we do have large programs to do, as I say, we'll often get a team in. And I know one of the vets within Munster, Dennis, like he'll often go out and assist with us, make sure those programs are actually happening. Also, what we are finding as well is that some of those programs, AI technicians will turn up and we will know that program has not been, something is iffy or something is not correct in that. And look, and there's ways maybe around that, but like if you're not doing those injections right, not getting the timings right, you can end up with a poor result. So really follow to the letter of the law what you've been told. It's really, really, really important to do it, and try not to mix up the injections. You know, that's a key one, and using proper needles, getting them in deep enough, all that stuff. So have a good conversation with your vet about it.
Give it the time. Charles, I think you wish to
Yeah, I
add
was
a
going
comment.
to chip in on that one too, because I mean, if as a farmer you realise that a mistake has been made with the programme, please contact your vet straight away. Because if we hear straight away that something's gone wrong, we could possibly save the programme. But if we hear about it 3 days later, we've lost it. But the other one to be careful of is about the seeders and losing seeders, you know. And it does happen, and in fairness, it was stressed on the video there, and we saw Mary Louise cutting strings. And certainly with heifers, I'd always cut the strings. I'd even go so far as to say, I think I said it on the video there, was the fact that you remove the strings if the heifers are going to be housed. And that could be an issue this year. With the weather the way it's going, we could have these devices in there at that time. Now, if a seeder is removed, it's not ideal, but it doesn't mean the program is wasted, because the seeder will improve the synchrony, i.e. keeping it as tight as possible. And if I was using sex semen on this as fixed time AI, and the seeder had been removed, possibly for that individual animal, I'd say no, we'll use conventional semen, rather than using sex semen, because the timing needs to be much tighter. But the other thing is, and it has happened to technicians, unfortunately, is they'll turn up on farms and the farmer will say, oh, there were 3 animals lost their seeders. He puts his hand in there and the seeder's still in place. Unfortunately, if the seeder is still in place, you can remove it, but you can't serve it. That animal is not going to conceive. There's no point in serving that particular animal in that situation. So they do get lost, but if you think they're lost, double check that they have been lost, because that mistake can sometimes be made. But if they're lost, we can still work with the program.
Yeah. So a clean, gloved hand and make sure the device has been removed.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And Michael, then in your experience with these late calvers, do you find that maybe putting them on once a day or doing something nutritionally may be of benefit?
Yeah, well, look, as I said, I suppose the last 2 or 3 years we've put them on once a day, kind of emptying calves by the first week of April on, and that has made a difference. So they've been coming into the parlour twice a day. And they've been getting fed twice a day, but they've only been milked once a day. Look, I found that a success, to be fair. Not in all cases, but it has certainly worked in some cases, that it would not come back a month. They might calve the middle of March the following year. So at least they're close enough to that 6-week calving rate. Again, you're trying to get up to the 90%.
Yeah, and it's a big challenge on farm, having these late calvers when you start breeding. So It's probably easier to concentrate on one thing, and the late calver may happen. It happens at the time when you've started breeding. They're way down the pecking order in terms of your priority.
Totally. Sure, your priority is obviously your heifers and your cows who are ready for AI. They're taking up all your time watching those heats. So I suppose the late calver can be pushed into the background a small bit.
Yeah, so it's all part of the cycle that happens on the farm every year, you know. So I suppose in terms of tightening everything up, and Charles, would you have any more comments on that?
I think one thing on the tightening up is, I mean, some of these late calvers actually were cows that were bulled in the first 3 weeks of the breeding period, okay? They didn't repeat, so everyone thought everything was okay. And then the next thing is they turn up 6, 7, 8 weeks later and they repeat at that stage. And some of those animals didn't actually go in calf at all, they just didn't happen to repeat. And there's certainly an argument for saying, I mean, a lot of the time, you know, Mary Louise, you'll be called to go and scan cows in August, September for pregnancy. To be fair, all you're doing when you find an empty cow there is confirming she's on the cull list. You know, we're not really adding any value here. I think and it's certainly, I know that some vets are looking at this more, and I know that in New Zealand they do this as a sort of standard. You know, you start serving your cows, 7 weeks into the breeding season, you actually go and scan all the cows that were served in the first 3 weeks and haven't repeated. And the reality is about 10% of those are actually empty, and yet we think they're in calf. But if you pick them up in week 7, you can then put them onto a program to get them cycling. You basically do a fixed time AI program on those again. You're then going to serve them in the middle of week 8. Hopefully they'll go in calf. But if they don't go in calf, they're going to repeat again then before the 12 weeks are up, which means you've caught these cows. Because remember, these were good cows. These were cows that were served in the first 3 weeks. It's a shame to lose them. But if we don't actively go in and scan, and I appreciate from a farmer's point of view, he waits frequently until the end of the service period, plus a month, okay, we'll go and scan them then. And that's when you can get them all, whether they're in calf or not. But we can't do anything with them, you know, the empty ones. So I think there's an opportunity there to tighten up those cows.
So it's too late, basically, if you don't do something on time. So, and Mary Louise, in terms of like this year being a challenging year, and I know one of the old things I used to always say was that it was good to have an animal on a rising plane of nutrition when you're trying to get them back in calf. So given the way 2024 has gone so far with the weather and the inability of farmers in general to get cows out to grass and the difficulty they've had with that, if this weather was to continue for another couple of weeks, what advice would you give to farmers in that situation?
I suppose if the weather is continuing the way it is to the next, like into a coming weeks, we're going to be in a massive issue with fodder. So it's really a case of there's more concentrates going to have to be fed, but bearing in mind that you're going to have to provide some form of fibre if you're doing that. It would be a massive challenge. I suppose, you know, the benefits of on-off grazing, strip grazing, moving wires, you know, getting cows out for a little bit of grass will definitely help the thing as well. And I know ground is wet, and anywhere that has been grazed is slow to come back, and ground is, you know, those fields that are grazed are very, very wet. So it is just a case of trying to pick your few paddocks, get the few cows out for a couple of hours, and stretch what fodder you have and provide extra concentrates, and, you know, if sourcing other forms of fodder may be necessary as well.
We can't sacrifice nutrition, so if we sacrifice nutrition, fertility is going to suffer big time and conception rates will fall. So Martin, would you have any comments on the whole area around nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, there's heaps. I wonder, Michael, what are you thinking of doing? I know the area of ground that you'd be out there would be challenged at some times.
Yeah, I suppose in terms of cows, I've been quite lucky. I suppose half my land is quite good, half my platform is quite good, and the other half is quite wet. So I've been lucky. To date, I have about 40% of the platform grazed. So what I've been doing so far is cows have been going out on days that it's good enough to do so. They've been going out for kind of 3 hours and going back in. But I found that once they go out hungry, they will do as much grazing as if they're out for a full day nearly. You know. But so it's been a case of trying to manage that. I'm dealing with a public road as well. I've crossed the road, so it has been challenging, certainly. In terms of heifers, then look, I I would like to get my heifers out. Look at in the next couple of weeks. At the moment, the way it's looking, I can't see them getting out in the next fortnight anyway. Look, we'll have to play it by ear, I suppose, Martin, and see how it goes. I'm lucky enough that I have, at the moment, I have enough fodder, but I'm very conscious that there's plenty of guys out there not too far away from me that have no grazing at all done, be it cows or heifers. So look, I'm lucky enough, really.
Sure, yeah, and Jerry, when you're saying about the whole nutrition piece, and listening to the whole conversation here, the one thing we often take for granted is that, like, we run an incredibly compressed breeding season in Ireland, and the problem we have is that by the time we often pick up that something is wrong, the gates close, we're done, because it takes, even when we look at non-return rates, we go in and we do that first, the first service there in the first 3 weeks. It's week 4 before we get a sense of where even our conception rates are at. It's week 5, week 6 maybe before we can see something that we are actually reacting to. We're into week 7, week 8 of a 12-week breeding season, and the next thing we know, the vast majority of our cows have gone through. So the pre-prep is vital, and then really it's, the gates close. We have to get everything right before we start, and do as much as we can in the middle of it. So it's hugely challenging. I think the early scan is very helpful. It is more work, and it depends what stage you're at farming as well. How many cows you're trying to retain, what's your willingness to cull. And we actually have quite a high expectation in fertility here. Like, I hear people getting upset when they've over 10% empties in a 12-week breeding season, but sometimes that doesn't take into account the conditions and that's on the farm. So are we managing our expectations well enough for our farming system as well, and where do we ease the pressure a little bit for ourselves?
And I suppose for a farmer who would like to improve his fertility, one thing I would have noticed was when scanning cows, the herds that had a very low empty rate had a very good sub-index for fertility in their EBI. Yeah. So and they're probably the herds that are most suited to using sex semen. Would I be correct in saying?
Absolutely. I mean, if we look at it straight off, I mean, the fertility sub-index, which is a huge emphasis on within the EBI, drives body condition, retention, and uterine health. We know that for a fact, and we know that for those high solids producing cows, that will create a lot of your fertility platform. So from a genetic perspective, there's no question. And that's why I'm urging a little caution with some herds at the moment. They're veering towards, let's put in a bit of volume because we're going to have less cows. Just be careful. We may end up in a situation, particularly in nutritionally challenged years, where those higher volume, higher demand cows in those situations will struggle, and we'll lose what we think we'll gain by losing that fertility advantage.
So breed for fertility and you'll get longevity.
You do, and breed for fertility, and we breed for balance for your system, and that's probably what we're looking at. So not just high EBI per se, but really picking out the areas of balance. And really interesting in that, and just as an aside, when we're talking about the health aspect of it, we see a huge demand now for bulls with very high health status within their genetic profile, and I think that will also feed in ultimately to better productivity and fertility as well in cows.
We have some questions from our viewers tonight. Mary Louise, I had poor conception rate for 3 weeks. After leaving the bulls out when I finished AI. The bulls would have bulled some cows during AI.
I suppose the first thing that comes to mind is bull power. Have you enough bulls actually let out the cows? Have you AI'd for long enough? And if you're not AI'd for very long and letting off bulls, you need a massive amount of bulls to actually handle that. And you need mature bulls to do that. Young bulls won't necessarily be able to handle the workload. So the number of bulls we need, it's something you need to bear in mind. You need to give bulls time off from work as well. Be it out for 12 hours and in for 12 hours, or on for 24 and off for 24 hours. Rotating bulls is important. They need a chance to rest. They need to be well fed. So certainly it is very possible, and you do quite frequently see lulls in calving after the bulls have been let off. And I would certainly advocate bull breeding soundness examinations and increase your bull power.
Absolutely, and there's another question about using vasectomized bulls. how many bulls should you keep as a minimum and what kind of rates?
I suppose there's no real set figure you can put on that because it very much depends on what you actually want those bulls to do and when they're being let out. I certainly, if you're letting off vasectomized bulls with the cows, you'd want to have done several rounds of VI and reduce the numbers that are actually going to be bulling on a daily basis, because a lot of the time these are young bulls on their first season out. They're only 14, 15 months old and they will get hurt. So you definitely need a fleet of them.
Absolutely, and we do see them getting hurt quite frequently,
yeah, very frequently,
and being left out too soon. You know,
Yeah.
If heifers are a target weight and they're not seen bulling, what would you advise?
I'd scan them in case they're in calf. Would be the first thing I'd check. Then I suppose the other thing is, you know, with this year they're still inside. It is hard to see them bulling. If you are worried, get them scanned, see are they actually cycling, or else use heat detection aids and see are they. I would certainly, if they're at target weight, they should be cycling.
They should be cycling.
Yeah.
So very good.
Can I chip in on that one? Just to say, I completely agree with what you're saying. You do want to scan them. Don't just go and set them up on a program. You know, now often with heifers, if they've been cycling away, you can do that without scanning. You don't have to. You know, if you've seen them cycling, I'd be happy enough to set them up on a program. But please, if they haven't been cycling at all, and there's no evidence of cycling at all, we need to find out why before we go doing a program, because the programs won't get them cycling, if you understand me. You know, the program is basically to adapt the cycle, but they have to be cycling already before the program's going to work.
I have a question for you, Charles. When doing a Synch program with heifers and cows, and you know what time you are doing fixed time AA at, but you have collars on the cows and they're telling you the animal isn't on heat, what do you consider the best time? Should you stick to the program instead or what?
Absolutely. As we said earlier, when you commit to doing one of these programs, you're committing to a synchronization program with fixed time AI. And the fixed time AI has been predetermined, and it's predetermined by the timings of when we give those injections of the luteinized, the prostaglandin, when we remove the CEDARs, and when we give the GnRH. So it's all down to that. So once you start on that, please don't start looking at the collars at that stage. You know, this is when we actually have to have faith and stick with the program. So stick with the program, even though they may not be showing signs of heat.
Absolutely, very good, very good. So sticking with the program, making it as easy as possible for your AI tech, doing everything, you know, to get a return on the investment that you've put in is vital for this scenario to have a successful outcome for our farmer. So any final comments, Michael?
Just to comment on that, Charles. So look, from my own point of view, last year was my first time synchronizing my heifers, and the fact that I was running two programs, a sexed program and a conventional program, like, I won't lie, there's a considerable workload involved, you know, in that. So I would say the main thing from a farmer point of view is that your facilities for getting the heifers in and so on are up to scratch, but also that you have enough people on hand. I'm very lucky at home. I have both parents at home, and I was on two programs, so I was given injections at 6 o'clock in the morning and again at 11 o'clock. So I was very conscious that, and I would be very conscious for farmers who are planning on using the program, plenty of help around is absolutely vital.
Yeah, trying to make it easy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Any final comments from any of my other?
It's a team performance, this, you know, and it's basically the team is your veterinary, you know, the farmer himself to organise it and pull everyone together. The veterinary practitioner to come up with a program if a program is suitable, but that's really the vet piece. And then the AI service and the AI technician. But we all have to be pulling together, and for that to happen, then we can get good fertility. But everyone needs to be on site, so it's a team game.
Absolutely. So it's a game of inches, and every inch counts. So with that, folks, I think we're coming near the end of our time. So I'd like to thank our production team, Leaning Tree Media, Caroline, Frankie, Paul, and Guy. Thanks to all our speakers, Mary Louise, Michael, Martin, and Charles. We want to also thank our sponsors, Excel Vet, Skillnet, and Zoetis. And as farmers, we hope we've given you an idea of what's available and what may work best on your farm, and to give you an option, an a la carte menu really of what may work for you. Thank you very much.